I wasn't supposed to survive. One moment, I was living an ordinary life, busy, distracted, confident that I had years ahead of me. The next, I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed, the machines screaming warnings that my heart had given up the battle before I even knew a war had begun. The world around me blurred. The colors, the sounds, they twisted into a muted haze. I heard doctors shouting. I heard the frantic rustle of footsteps and the mechanical hum of something failing, and then a snap, like a wire breaking inside me, and I was falling. Not metaphorically. I was falling, slipping into a darkness so thick it seemed to breathe. It wasn't sleep. It wasn't a dream. It was real, terrifyingly real. A coldness unlike anything in this world, wrapped around me, pulling, dragging. At first, I thought I was alone in that darkness. I was wrong. From somewhere beyond the black, things stirred, shapes, movements, whispered voices that didn't belong to anything human. They circled like vultures, watching, waiting, hungering. The air grew heavy with a presence I can only describe as pure malice, intelligent, deliberate evil. It knew me, it hated me, and it wasn't in any rush. I tried to scream, but there was no sound, no body, only a mind, wide awake, trapped somewhere I didn't understand. Panic clawed at me, but there was nowhere to run. I was utterly exposed. And that's when I saw them. Figures towering, radiant beings stepping into the darkness with a force that shook the ground I could no longer feel. Where they walked, the blackness shivered. Their faces were fierce, not soft. Warriors, not comforters. Their weapons gleamed with a light that burned through the gloom, every movement a declaration of defiance against the evil that surrounded them. And standing opposite them were other figures, grotesque, twisted things that seemed made from nightmares themselves. Their laughter, if you could call it that, vibrated through the void, mocking and cruel. The battle lines were drawn. I realized, with a sick, twisting horror, they weren't fighting each other randomly. They were fighting over me. I didn't know what would happen if I lost, but somehow, I knew losing wasn't an option. What I experienced in the next moments would shatter everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the invisible war raging around us every single day. The darkness tightened around me. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was a suffocating, sentient thing. A thick, oppressive force pressing against every part of my consciousness, whispering doubts that slid into my mind like poison. No one is coming for you. You are forgotten. You belong to us. Each word sank into me like a hook, pulling me deeper into despair. The fear was overwhelming, so deep it felt primal, a terror I couldn't rationalize or fight. I floated. Or maybe I was falling through a landscape that had no ground, no sky, no end. Only endless grey shadows twisting in the void. Every so often, I caught glimpses of faces among the shadows, broken, anguished, screaming in silence, faces of people who had been swallowed whole by whatever ruled this place. Their eyes met mine, pleading. Some reached out, hands twisted in agony, as if begging for rescue. But I couldn't help them. I couldn't even help myself. Time didn't exist there. Seconds stretched into eternities. Every heartbeat, if I still had one, felt like a hammer blow in the silence. I started to wonder if this was all there was, if I was already lost, destined to be another trapped soul, forgotten in the endless expanse of darkness. And then, it grew worse. The creatures came closer. I didn't see them clearly at first, only flashes of grotesque forms, misshapen and foul. They moved with a jerky, predatory rhythm, as though their bodies weren't fully attached to the laws of physics. Their limbs seemed wrong, too many in some places, not enough in others. The closer they came, the colder it grew, until the chill wasn't just around me but inside me. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. They had all the time in eternity. One creature, larger than the rest, crept toward me, its form shifting like smoke and bone. Its eyes were twin pits of hatred, and when it spoke, The words weren't sounds, they were emotions, hammering into my mind. You are ours, you always have been. I wanted to resist, to scream, to fight. But in that moment, stripped of my body, my defenses, I realized something horrifying. Without help, I had no power here, no strength, no voice. Despair crushed me. I began to believe the voices. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was forgotten. Maybe I was worthless. And that, I think, was the real battle. Not for my body, but for my very identity. I was seconds, or maybe less, from giving in, from surrendering to the voices, when something deep within me, some fragment of hope, long buried and nearly snuffed out, cried out, not with words, but with yearning. A yearning not just to be saved, but to be seen. And somewhere, in the endless black, something heard me, far away at first, like a distant star flickering on the horizon. A warmth stirred. It was so faint that I thought it might be a trick, a last cruelty before the end. But it grew stronger. The creatures recoiled, snarling and shrieking in a language not meant for human ears. They backed away, hissing into the darkness, as if burned by the mere approach of this unseen force. I felt it before I saw it, a presence so overwhelming, so vast and pure, that the darkness itself seemed to shudder and flee. Love, power, authority, undeniable. I didn't know yet what it was, but I knew this. The battle was not over, and I was not alone. The light grew, and the darkness screamed. It wasn't a sound you could hear with your ears, it was deeper, vibrating through the very core of my being. The creatures that had surrounded me scattered like insects before a flame, their hideous forms dissolving into the shadows. But even as they fled, I knew this was no easy victory. They would not give up without a fight. The presence moved closer, and for the first time, I saw a figure stepped forward, a being of unimaginable brilliance, clothed not just in light, but in authority. Every fiber of my soul recognized him before my mind could form the thought. This was no angel. This was no mere messenger. This was the King, Jesus. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His eyes, so deep, so full of sorrow and fierce love, met mine. And in that moment, I understood. He knew me. Every thought, every sin, every broken promise, every shattered dream. And he loved me still. Behind him, others appeared, angels, clothed in light, their faces set like flint. Warriors of heaven, each radiating a power that dwarfed the darkness around them. They stood ready, a heavenly host, prepared for war. The darkness surged in answer. The creatures returned, but they were different now, enraged, desperate. More poured in from the blackness, their numbers swelling, their grotesque forms twisting and writhing as they prepared to strike. Their hatred wasn't just directed at the angels. It was personal. It was aimed at me. And then it began. The two forces collided in an explosion of power that shook the very fabric of that otherworldly place. The angels moved with a precision and authority that was both beautiful and terrifying. Every strike they made was decisive, shattering their enemies with blasts of pure light. The demons fought back with venom and rage, clawing and tearing, their forms shifting into even more horrifying shapes as they attacked. Where their claws met light, sparks of agony flew, shrieking into the void. But for every blow they struck, the angels responded with greater force, greater brilliance. The battle raged around me like a living storm. I watched in awe and terror as the unseen war for my soul unfolded before my eyes. Each clash, each movement, felt connected to me somehow, as if every blow landed was a declaration about who I was and who I was meant to be. It wasn't random. It was intimate, personal, and yet, amid the chaos, something else was happening. The demons weren't just fighting blindly. They were targeting me, lunging at me, trying to grasp my soul and drag it into their grasp. I could feel their cold hunger, their desperate need to claim me as their prize. One dark figure, larger and more terrible than the rest, broke through the lines. It reached for me, its claws inches from my essence. I could feel the emptiness in it, the bottomless pit of despair it carried, and it wanted to pull me into that same void. But before it could touch me, he moved. Jesus stepped forward. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't shout. He simply was. And that was enough. From him radiated a power so complete, so absolute, that the creature recoiled as if struck by a thunderbolt. It shrieked not just in pain, but in pure terror, and fled back into the shadows from which it came. The battle began to turn. One by one, the demons were driven back, their shrieks echoing into the void. The angels pressed forward, their movements swift and unstoppable, until the darkness itself seemed to fracture and fall away like broken glass under the force of a raging river. Finally, all that remained was light. Pure, blinding, living light. I collapsed, overwhelmed. Not onto ground, there was no ground, but into the arms of peace itself. The struggle was over. I was safe. Or so I thought. Jesus approached, his face both fierce and tender. He knelt beside me and spoke, not with his mouth, but directly into my soul. You are mine. You always have been, but you must choose. Choose. It wasn't enough that he had fought for me. I had to respond. In the deepest place inside me, beyond fear, beyond shame, beyond doubt, I chose. I chose him. The moment I made that choice, a new wave of light washed over me. It filled every broken, hollow place inside me. It remade me. I wasn't just rescued. I was redeemed. And as the light enveloped me, the darkness disappeared completely, like mist under the morning sun. I was no longer falling. I was rising back toward life, toward purpose, toward home. The light wasn't just around me anymore. It was in me, pouring into every shattered, hollow space that the darkness had claimed. Warmth spread through places inside I didn't even know existed, stitching back together what fear and despair had torn apart. I could feel it. Hope. Real, breathing, undeniable hope. Not the fragile, trembling hope of this world, but something stronger, eternal. Jesus stood before me, not as a distant savior, but as a friend closer than my own breath. His presence silenced every lingering lie the darkness had ever whispered. Every accusation that I wasn't enough, wasn't worthy, was wiped away with the simple truth blazing in his gaze. You are loved. You are chosen. You are mine. I wanted to speak, to thank him, to fall at his feet, but words were useless here. They were too small for the weight of this moment. Instead, I wept. Not from sadness, but from a joy so overwhelming, it felt like my soul might break apart under the beauty of it. Every tear was a release, a surrender, an unmaking of all the walls I had built inside myself for years. And he welcomed it. He welcomed me. I saw flashes, then memories of my life, but through his eyes. Not as a long list of failures, but as a story worth redeeming. Every scar, every wound, every stumble. He had seen it all, and yet he had never turned away. Never once. Even the moments when I thought he was absent, he had been closer than my shadow. Even the times I had rejected him, he had stayed. The realization crushed me and set me free all at once. The angels stood in the distance, a silent guard, their weapons at rest now. The darkness had fled, but they remained, as if still protecting, still watching, making sure nothing ever threatened this sacred space again. And in the center of it all was him. I understood now. It had never been a fair fight. The darkness had raged and clawed and screamed, but it had never stood a chance. Not against him, because where his light is, darkness cannot stay. I was no longer a victim, no longer a prize to be fought over. I was his, and he was mine, and that truth would change everything forever. The pull began gentle but unstoppable. I felt myself rising, drawn upward by an invisible force. leaving behind the battleground, the angels, the blinding light, but never leaving him. His presence stayed with me, like a flame burning deep inside. The darkness was nowhere to be found. Only warmth, only peace. As I rose higher, I sensed the boundary between worlds, approaching thin, delicate, like a membrane about to tear. I knew once I crossed it, everything would change. I would wake. I would live. But I would never be the same. With one final surge, I broke through. My eyes flew open to the blinding lights of the hospital ceiling. Machines beeped in frantic rhythms. Voices shouted in urgent tones. Hands pressed against my chest. I gasped, pulling in air like a man drowning. And they gasped too, the doctors, the nurses, because, against all odds, against every prediction, I was alive. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know why. I had been fought for. I had been claimed. I had been chosen. Not even death itself could steal me away. And now I was living for a reason, a purpose far bigger than I had ever imagined. There are things happening all around us, things unseen, yet more real than the ground beneath our feet. We go through our days thinking we're just bodies, just brains, just people moving through time, but there's more, much more. I know, because I saw it. There is a war we're not trained to see, one not fought with bullets or politics, but with eternal consequences. A war for the soul, for your soul. And if you've ever felt like you were being torn between despair and hope, between fear and love, maybe it's because you are. But there's good news. You're not alone. You've never been. Even in your darkest moments when it feels like no one sees you, no one hears you, there is a Savior who does. And he's not distant. He's fighting for you, too. This story wasn't just about what happened to me. It's a reminder of what's possible for you. So ask yourself, what if you're worth fighting for? What if everything you've ever needed is waiting for you to choose? If this story moved you, share it. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe, like, and stay with us. Because the unseen is real.